Hello. For most of us, we're now 7 weeks into a lockdown, and in reality, it looks like it could continue for quite some time if we're to make sure that there is no second wave of this pandemic. I think the rainy weather this week has had an impact on all of our moods, our ability, our attitude. Or is that just me? I sense a level of irritability sweeping in as we fear a second wave and what that might mean for getting back to normal. And with all of that in mind, over the next few weeks, I thought we could look at what do we do when there's nothing you can do? What do you do when there's no way forward at the moment and we're just waiting? These are problems for which at the moment there are seemingly no solutions, where there are questions but no answers. It is what it is, and it looks like that's just the way it's going to be. Questions we all have. Our natural response is to think of and create options, and they are not always good options. We might want to ignore the advice given. We might want to go to bed for weeks on end. We might want to scream, give up, drink, become jealous of those that can come and go, and we might get resentful or angry. And we start to compare ourselves to others and how they are coping. In our heads, it seems like everyone else appears to be coping better than we are, doing the perfect homeschooling, having the perfect family life and relationship with their partners. All things you were supposed to have, and it's just not happening. And our brains tempt us to feel that I'll never be free, we'll never get out again. The lockdown is forever. What's the point? I'm never going to be happy again. So this week, I want to confront the primary emotion people feel when facing a new normal. The emotion that makes us want to throw up, panic, and run. We feel like life is out of control and God has let go. God, though, has not let go. He's not absent, apathetic, or angry with us. We're not being punished for our sin or anybody else's. Understanding this is really key if we are to win the battle of what's going on in our minds and how we can cope with more lockdown. In these times, we need to know that God cares. We need to know and feel his presence in the storm, because sometimes it just feels like he has left us. Sometimes we're so intent on listening to the voices in our head that we don't seek his voice. Sometimes we're so convinced of the way God should help that we can't be still enough to listen to what he thinks about our situation. There are many times in the Old and New Testament that God seemingly abandoned his favourite people, but that wasn't the case. In fact, he was at work. And that is true for us, for you too. God is always at work. He's always rooting for you. He hasn't walked off in some huff or strop. He isn't punishing us. That's just not who he is. In the book of Matthew, Jesus is in Galilee and he had just given his disciples instructions of how to go around doing ministry. He's on his way somewhere and some of John the Baptist's followers stop him to ask him a question that John had given them to ask Jesus. And John wants to know, are you really the Messiah, or is someone else coming? Are we waiting on someone else? John himself can't come and ask Jesus these questions because he's in prison for telling everyone that the Jewish king, Herod Antipas, and his brother's wife are committing adultery. So maybe he was sitting in jail, waiting for Jesus to come and sort it all out. He's waiting for the moment when his position as the Son of God would put him and as the ruler of the Jews, and John would be set free. After all, John and Jesus are linked. Their mothers are cousins. They had a good friendship, and Jesus regularly praised John publicly. But he's still stuck in the prison. And Jesus did not even visit him, did not send him food, didn't send angels to comfort him or to get him out. In fact, we read that when Jesus heard that John had been put in prison, he returned to Galilee and lived in Capernaum. So he actually went in the opposite direction, as far north as possible, leaving John alone in his prison cell. And when he sent the message to Jesus, John had been in prison for about 12, 15 months and probably was getting fed up with nothing happening, of waiting around for God to show up, to do something and get things back to normal. But it seems as though he doesn't. And Jesus replies to John's friends and he says, go and tell him about all of what is going on here, miracles and healings. And basically he's saying everything I'm doing for everyone else, but not John. And maybe you are wondering what God is doing for you right now. When is he going to show up and sort my situation out? And then Jesus adds, blessed is the man who does not fall away on account of me. Maybe it's a message for us as well during these coronavirus days as we stay at home waiting, not doing much, hanging around. And Jesus is saying to John and to us, don't be offended. Don't trip up. Don't start sinning. Don't feel abandoned because of what I am doing. It may not make sense, but stick with it. Hold in there. And one day it will all make perfect sense. Jesus says, don't confuse my silence with absence. And we also see this action or seemingly lack of action with Jesus when he's told that Lazarus is sick. Lazarus and Jesus were close friends, and yet on hearing that his good friend was ill, he stayed where he was. Again, the implication being that we shouldn't confuse God's absence for apathy. We won't always know his ways or his plans, but he's always there, doing what only he knows is best. Now, things turned out quite well in the end for Lazarus. Not so good for John the Baptist. Things don't always go the way our brains think. Yearning for happy endings to everything. Things didn't turn out all that good for Jesus either. He didn't shirk away from what he needed to do because he knew what was best for everyone in the end. By going to the cross, God himself did battle with death, and he shows us through the resurrection that there are better days ahead. It will be all right in the very end. We just need to hold on, to wait now. When we don't see God working how we want him to, or jumping to our every request, our minds start doing crazy things. We start listening to the lies that I mentioned earlier. I'm not good enough, and that there is no point. And we compare ourselves to others, and in that process, we lose our joy, our hope, and our purpose. When we feel that happening, this is the time to dig deep and realise what is happening and put a stop to it. You have not been forgotten or abandoned by God. Your circumstances are just that, circumstances. They are not proof of the presence or absence of God. So, over the next few weeks, when you are tempted to listen to the lies, when staying in is getting to you, when you crave a hug, remember, you can be happy. Something good will come out of all of this pandemic, and your life does have purpose to it. Focus on something that you can be grateful for. Remember a time when God has been faithful, and believe that one day we will look back and see what God has been doing. Maybe this is the first time that you're going to trust God and believe in Jesus. Maybe you're ready to give him a chance to show you that he can be trusted. All you need to do is invite him in, say sorry for your unbelief, and be still and listen. It's a tough time. You will have bad days or bad weeks. It was a really tough week for me this week, and it's only with the grace and mercy of God that I have got through it and stayed sane. Well, as sane as I can be. You may not have the answers we want. We may not agree with political leaders' decisions, but we can choose our attitude and our behaviours. We can choose what we do trust. For me, I trust Jesus, and because of that, I can choose to have joy. I can choose to do something good. I can look to Jesus and lean on him. And friends, you can too. And I know Jesus has got it covered. He's not surprised by what is happening, and I can leave it as that. So stay safe, everyone. Do get in touch if you want to know how to make the next steps in your faith journey. I'll be more than happy to help you. Know that you are loved and go in peace. Amen.